This podcast is brought to you by the Albany Public Library main branch and the generosity of listeners like you. What is a podcast? God, Daddy, these people talk as much as you do. Razib Khan's Unsupervised Learning.
Thanks for listening to the ungated version of the Unsupervised Learning podcast. If you want to read some essays on some of these topics, please check out razib.substack.com. Again, that's razib.substack.com. Thank you.
You know that genetics plays a huge role in our health, and more people are using genetic testing to determine risk for diseases like cancer for themselves and their kids than ever before. So I want to tell you about Orchid. It's the only company that does whole genome testing for embryos, testing before your child is born. If you're doing IVF, this is a clear choice now because now you can reduce risk for thousands of single gene disorders, including heritable forms of autism, pediatric cancers, and birth defects. Check them out at orchidhealth.com.
Hey, everybody. This is Razib with the Unsupervised Learning podcast, and I am here with two very eminent and special guests. They are editors. Actually, Zoe, are you an editor? Like, what is your title?
I'm an editor. I'm
Okay, what are you?
Community Engagement Officer.
Okay, that's a very millennial / Zoomer title to have.
I do a bit of everything. I organize the Quillette socials. I do our marketing. I do some admin. I run a podcast. I do a lot.
Yeah, you're the Girl Friday. You're Claire Lehmann's Girl Friday. Like whatever needs to be done, you will do, right? And Iona, we have talked multiple times on podcasts. I've been on your podcast several times. You've been on several of my podcasts, and I think the listeners they know who you are. And I'll put the links to the previous podcast. And you're an editor though, right?
I'm an editor. Yes, I'm an associate editor. I'm the most junior member of the editorial team at Quillette.
Yeah. So one thing that I want to do is, I want to get a general sense of, obviously who you guys are. I think, Iona, we know a little bit about you. I mean, damn, I know all about your ethnic history and, your childhood and your older sister. And, if anyone follows you on Twitter, I'm going to have to say they know a lot about you because you put it all out there. I'm not judging, but we all know that's true, right?
Yeah.
So you are an open book, as they say. I don't know as much I know a little bit about Zoe's ethnicity because, well, I mean, you know how I am. But Zoe, you work for Quillette, which is kind of, I'm going to just say controversial, although it's kind of a BS word, but it's somewhat edgy. Maybe it shouldn't be edgy, but it's somewhat edgy. It's not the typical thing that a young woman of your age in the English speaking world, goes to work for some edgy publication. You know what I'm saying? Like you should be, I don't know, Instagramming your tech job and, the breakfast you had in like the yoga studio and all that stuff. Right.
I do a bit of that as well.
Okay. So you had that, you know what that life is. So why are you here? Like, I mean, what brought you here? Like, where are you from? I mean, you're obviously Australian, just listening to you. And I actually know a distant cousin of yours here in Austin. That's a whole different story. Yeah. I had dinner with him yesterday. I see him like every week. Okay. But in any case,
a fellow Kitherian, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I have his genotype, so I know he definitely is one. But in any case, so like, how did you get into? Let's just call it the heterodox space. Like, how did you get here? Where did you start?
Well, I've always been very interested in ideas and philosophy and politics. And as a teen, I was very much into like Marxism and feminism, Marxist feminism, veganism, everything that I sort of rail against now, I suppose, especially veganism. But I got to uni, got more into, social justice, but started to become disillusioned, started to see that a lot of the groups that I was sort of operating in, I don't know, it just became lame to me. Like we couldn't debate anything. There was I guess it lost that edginess. Maybe I'm attracted to the edginess. Maybe that's what attracted me to Quillette as well in the heterodox space. But I came across Claire. I thought she was extremely like attractive in the sense that she was brave. She was young. She was Aussie. She was a woman. I don't know. I hadn't met anyone like her before, and she sort of, she allowed me to like come out, I guess, as heterodox, and then.
Yeah, so Claire is Claire Lehmann, who I think pretty much all the listeners will probably know, but I did a podcast with her too. And I'm friendly with Claire as well. This is definitely not I'm not here to do a gotcha. Obviously, I'm friends with you guys, and I just wanted to see what's up with you, just so the listeners know. Like, don't expect me to. I don't have a dossier on you guys. I'm not gonna like have some ambush questions. That's for after the recording is stopped. No, I'm just joking. Yeah. So I mean, you're interested in these edgy ideas or whatever, apparently. But I'm actually curious because I, unlike a lot of people, have not had an ideological journey. I've kind of always been vaguely right wing, I think. And so I never went through, and I know many people that were like social justice warriors, and then they're far right, or vice versa, or all these other things. What attracted you to social justice? Because I've never been attracted to justice. That was kind of a joke.
I think it's a product. I think a lot of young women in general are interested in social justice. I still do. I think I still really care about social justice. I've always cared about the truth. I just became a bit more aware of where the truth lies now, and I'm a very empathetic person, but it actually hurts. Like, I still worry about offending people, even though I know that a lot of the opinions I hold are like offensive to some people. I'm still very conscious of that. And I don't relish in offending people or making people upset. But I just simply care more about the truth than offending people. So, yeah.
So here we are. You care more about the truth than offending people. Mm-hmm. And Iona, I know you're admittedly disagreeable. So have you ever been bothered by offending people?
Oh yeah. So I get easily hurt. So I get upset when people are offended. I get much less upset nowadays. I used to get very, very emotional over people attacking me, especially only on social media. It's never happened to me in real life. And as you know, in fact, I used to be constantly fighting with people on social media. And I think you were one of the people who told me to stop doing that. And Jonathan Haidt actually staged a kind of intervention. He sent me this very loving, I thought, email, which said, I really like your work, Iona, but you need to, he didn't phrase it exactly these words, but you need to get your fucking act together. Stop shit posting all day long and fighting with idiots on Twitter. He put it in a completely different wording from that wording, but that was the message. And I would like to say that the instant I received his email, I had a kind of Damascene conversion, but no, it was just a gradual drip. And now I think I've ceased to be upset by people attacking me on social media. And in real life, I don't often talk about politics in real life. And when I do, it's generally only with people who I know very well and trust, and I'm very much more careful about what I say, and I try to spend most of the time listening to their opinions and finding points of agreement. This is in real life. So I don't like real life conflict. But on the other hand, I've never been into the social justice stuff, and I have always find myself disagreeing with other people on the left very strongly. I had a lot of arguments with people when I was an undergraduate over politics. At that time, it was all about political correctness, and which later kind of evolved into the woke stuff. But already back then, I thought it was bollocks. And I would say that even though I'm a conflict avoider, I'm quite disagreeable in the sense that if I'm offered the choice between being diplomatic and careful and keep making and retaining friends and saying what I believe to be true, then I feel just a really strong and sometimes self-destructive urge to just say what I believe to be true. And I am unblackmailable because I just don't have any secrets. So I
Yeah.
actually think that that's a strength. Um, and yeah, I did score very high on very low on agreeableness on the ocean test and quite high on extroversion. So I'm a really kind of annoying old git, basically. That's what that combination means.
I scored very high in politeness. So I really care about like social rules and norms of politeness, but I'm not necessarily super agreeable for a woman. And I think just the fact that we work in this space, Iona, and we're women, and Claire's the same, we have quite masculine sort of personalities in some ways. I think it's shown that like men care more about the truth than women do. That's a very general statement, but when asked, whether this fact could hurt someone emotionally, but it's still true, women are more likely to choose to like sort of obscure the fact. And I think all three of us, Claire, Iona, and myself, are sort of strange women and maybe have found ourselves, in female groups, odd ones out, like black sheep at times because of our masculine sort of desire for the truth. What do you think, Iona?
Yeah, I think that's true. I'm very careful with people who are close to me, so I base my friendships on how people behave towards me in real life and whether they're kind, loyal, etc. And I keep that completely separate from what their political beliefs might be. So usually I try to avoid actually getting onto political topics. And if we do have a disagreement, I just ask a lot of questions and try to find out why they think the way that they think. But I don't really bother to argue my point if it's someone who's a close friend.
Me too. And what I found is that most of my friends know that I'm the hyper political one, and that they can talk about politics with me if they want to, but I don't bring it up. I sort of let them come to me, knowing that, I'll be here to chat about it if they want to.
Yeah, I did mute quite a lot of people on Facebook. There's an option to unfollow but remain friends. And I have quite a few acquaintances who are wrongly on the Palestinian side of the Israel-Gaza conflict, and I unfollowed but remained friends with all of them on Facebook. And I think that's kind of typical of how I deal with things from real life acquaintances. I feel also that if you have been genuinely kind to me in real life or in some material way, then you can't buy my speech. You can't make me say something I don't agree with, but you can kind of buy my silence. So there are a couple of public figures who I think have really beclowned themselves.
Beclowned? Love it.
Beclowned, yeah. In public discourse. I think it is, yeah.
I love it.
And I see a lot of people critiquing them on Twitter, but because they were actually supportive to me behind the scenes in the past, I never say anything about them specifically. And I don't even like any posts that are critiquing them, even though I agree with all of the criticisms. And a couple of these people have just turned out to be total idiots and genuine bad actors politically. But
you've got to disclose their names after this.
I think you can guess, but let's not actually say anything.
Is it
some of
Razib?
them, yeah, Razif is. I
Many
mean,
such cases.
my principle is your behavior on a personal level can completely outweigh your politics as far as I'm concerned. I'm not therefore going to vote for you or actually endorse you or go so far as to be sharing stuff or saying things that I don't agree with, but I will just discreetly scroll on by and ignore your political stuff. And with those people, I also sometimes go in, and if they post a photo of their dog or something like that, I like that photo and I'm like, your dog is so adorable. So I'm actively looking for something I can agree with them on to keep the friendly feelings. But yeah, I'm very loyal to people who've been kind. Um, and I think their
So
politics is secondary to personal behavior.
yeah, I want to ask about this because I think that this is a exceptional view now, or like among the younger generations here in the U.S. I don't know how it is in other countries. You know, Claire has told me in Australia it's not as polarized, partly because everyone votes and all this stuff. Here in the U.S., to somewhat they said almost everything is political. So, you know, there'll be some actor that says something, and someone will be like, "People don't know how problematic this person is," and it'll be some like stupid political thing. Who cares? I don't care. But this is a thing now among younger people. And I think what you guys are saying is, for you, the personal is the personal, the political is the personal, or the political is the political, and they're separated, right? But I mean, Zoe, I'm actually kind of curious in particular about your interactions because you know you're younger and you know a lot of young people. Is this just an online thing, or is this bleeding over into real life? I'm just curious.
Look, it definitely does bleed over into real life. I feel like with this conflict in Israel, it's a next level of me sort of being concerned about how it's going to affect my in-person, relationships. Before I know, like, I had controversial opinions on, I don't know, gender ideology or the voice to parliament or things like that. But in reality, like, most people actually agreed with me. Most people agree that gender ideology is pretty wacky. Most Aussies voted no to the Indigenous voice to parliament. So, most people actually agreed with me. But
I gotta ask you a question. I have no idea what you guys are talking about because I never bothered to look into it. I just know Misha Saul was extremely happy, and what? Okay, what is the? Tell us in America what this is.
pretty much we had a referendum, so a vote on whether we should change our constitution to include an Indigenous voice to parliament, which was we understood it was a bit unclear, but a group of Aboriginal leaders who would advise government on like whether specific laws should be passed, or pretty much, yeah, just an Aboriginal voice to parliament. And yeah, we voted no it was not necessarily a landslide as such, but it was a resounding no. Yeah.
But I mean, this sounds like a symbolic thing.
To me, it was symbolic, and you don't fuck with the Constitution just for symbolic reasons. You change it only if it's going to have a tangible impact, and I didn't think it was going to. And I think most Australians agreed that it was purely symbolic, and that so many symbolic acts are done today. Like, pretty much every meeting you do here, I'm not sure if it's the same in the States, but you do a welcome to country. And so much of it is tokenistic, and it just felt like another sort of token thing.
Well, are you talking about the land acknowledgements?
Yeah.
Oh,
Land
okay,
acknowledgements.
They're not like super common in the States, like in some like left-wing spaces and maybe some sorts of NGOs, but I almost never hear about it outside of the online context. But in Australia, it's way more mainstream, right?
Yeah. Like, I think that Jordan Peterson tweet went viral of him saying that when he landed in Sydney with Qantas, our national airline, there was a welcome to country, and he thought or a land acknowledgement, and he thought that was unnecessary. And I went to the Opera House last weekend, and there was one. There's pretty much everywhere, even
why are you guys
Zoom
so
meetings.
into that? Yeah, why are you guys so into that? I'm just curious.
Good question.
Does anyone know?
I suppose Australia has a different history with, white Australia versus our Indigenous population. We never had a treaty. We never had, it's very different to the sort of Maori experience or to the Native American experience. I think there's more of a divide here, and I think that brings with it a guilt, and a lot of people really want things to be better for Aboriginal people, and we think it would make it better if we acknowledge the local tribe. But is that actually creating change in the lives of Aboriginal people? I don't think so.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, from what little I've read about it, it does seem to be a particularly I'm not going to use the word problematic, but I mean, there was a lot of nasty. I think, part of the issue is the Indigenous people in Australia were hunter-gathering foragers, right? So how do you, as a social, political, colonizing power, who do you deal with?
Exactly.
In New Zealand, you have chieftains that were relatively extensive, and obviously in the New World, there were different levels of organization, but there were nations.
Exactly.
In the American South, we have the civilized tribes and whatnot. So it's a little bit rationalized there, whereas in Australia, it was not quite like that, right? I mean, I'm just looking it up. So they became citizens in 1948. That's pretty rare. Or it's pretty late for that time,
And they got the vote in 1967, I believe, through a referendum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before that, they were classed as flora and fauna, which sounds fucked by standards.
You know what would be great, Iona. I know you spent a lot of time in Britain in your life. Land acknowledgements in the UK. We are on occupied Iceni land. All the Roman tribes. I'm serious. Someone's gonna want to do this.
I'm really surprised the Welsh haven't done this yet, actually, because I think it would go down a treat in Wales. These Saxon invaders. I only lived in Wales for 2 years, and actually I was at the University of Aberystwyth, and one of those years I was on research leave. So in fact, I spent really only a year in Wales, but we still, even though I was only on a 2-year contract, we all had to take Welsh lessons. And I also found that people would be speaking English with each other, and when people arrived who were non-Welsh, they would immediately switch to Welsh. And there was a very strong feeling of local patriotism there.
It's like Basque country.
So yeah, I think they'd love that.
I lived in Bilbao, and it was a similar thing. The Basques loved to speak Basque, Euskera. It was definitely more of a left-wing thing as well. It was a sign of
Yeah. So I mean, that's from an American perspective. That's also very interesting. That you were talking about Israel, and I know we were talking about politics and young people, and you're talking about Israel. Americans a lot of times don't understand or internalize very well left-wing nationalism. So arguably the IRA and Sinn Féin, they're left-wing party really now. It's left-wing nationalism. The ETA was left-wing. And actually Palestinian nationalism was left-wing. It was left-wing Marxist nationalism. And even now, the PLO still has the PFLP. That's the second largest faction. That's explicitly Marxist. Fatah was more left-wing. This is why they had cooperation with Bader Meinhof in the 1970s and stuff like that. And a lot of their funding was, in various sources from the Soviet Union. And so I think that's an interesting point where, in the New World and probably in Australia, it's this whole idea of left-wing nationalism seems kind of weird. But in Europe, you have these very, very left-wing people that are also nationalistic. In Scotland, you have this socialist party that's nationalist. but they basically just means they hate English people. It seems they love everybody else but the English, which many such cases, but still, it's a little strange.
I don't think that the Scottish National Party hate English people, actually. I think that they are way more way more sort of part of the globalist left than that. I really don't like the Scottish National Party at all for many different reasons, but I think that's not really a fair critique of them. I think that what they want is economic independence, and during the two independence referenda, the definition they were looking for of a Scottish national was anyone born in Scotland plus anybody who had been living in Scotland for at least 4 years at the time of the referendum. And they're very immigrant friendly. There are also, of course, a lot of English people in Scotland.
Well, I mean, they're immigrant friendly, but immigrants are not friendly to them, judging by how many people go to Scotland. But that's
well, given the choice, I think that Scotland is one of the whitest places on earth.
And where did
I think
the gender ideology come from? Like, they're super into that, right?
Yeah, very into that. So I think that's because my theory is it's because they're very woke types, but they don't really have any people of color, so they can't really lean into that style of politics.
Except their first minister.
Exactly, the Prime Minister.
Yes, they had to really scrape around to find somebody who is not, so pasty you have to put on sunglasses when they take their shirt off, which is 99.9% of people in Scotland, which is fine, by the way.
That's a microaggression, Iona. I find that as a very pale person, very offensive. Melanin challenged.
But yeah, I think for that reason, in order to create a kind of intersectional identity hierarchy, to make it relevant personally, they have to lean into the gender stuff, because anybody can take they them pronouns and become non-binary. I used to be more hostile to the idea of non-binary people, and I still think the concept is nonsense. And I really object to they them pronouns in writing, because I think it makes articles just impossible to read, extremely confusing. But I have since then encountered a few people in real life who wanted to transition and have desisted, and instead they've become quote unquote non-binary and taken the pronouns. And so I think it's provided a soft landing for some people, actually, and that's very good. So instead of actually having some major surgery or they've gone off the hormone treatments, and they're just being very androgynous and describing themselves as non-binary. And so I feel as though, okay, that's
an off-ramp.
Cool. That's fine. Yeah, it's an off-ramp.
Well, I mean, so you're talking about gender ideology. I think Quillette became a thing in, let's say, like the last 3 years or so of the teens, mostly culture war related stuff, affirmative action. Early on, there was some race and IQ stuff, which is still mentioned in the Wikipedia entry, but it's been a while. And then you have the gender ideology stuff that was kind of a big deal for a while, but I feel like I'm going to ask you what you guys think, that it's kind of peaked. I don't know how much further it's going to go, but you might have a different perspective internationally. I don't know. Harvard, as we're recording this, Harvard just removed pronoun pages from their DEI pages, just probably because they're worried about various types of backlash that are happening right now. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys think the culture wars, I mean, they're obviously still here, but I don't sense that they're rising in their, the temperature is no longer rising. We've stabilized. Maybe it's going to even drop, but I don't think it's rising. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think especially the gender stuff, trans activists have been awfully quiet lately, I must say. And I think it's because, you know, there's a genuine war happening. I mean, there's been conflicts happening this whole time, but we're seeing real war. We're seeing people being raped and massacred and beheaded and every day. And, you know, when trans people were saying that there's a genocide and, you know, where, you know, your words of violence and stuff, it just doesn't have the same effect anymore because we see real violence. So yeah, I think most like normies I speak to, most of my mates who aren't super online, they agree that all the gender stuff is crazy. And I think a lot of the race based talk that we were hearing as well, I think most people agree that it was a bit overblown. Yeah, maybe we've peaked.
And what do you think, Iona?
I don't know. I find it very hard to judge how widespread phenomena are, actually. I think that I feel the same way about many, many issues. For example, I feel the same way about what's going on in India. I hear a lot of anecdotes and news, and I'm just not sure how typical they are. I have a slightly skewed availability bias because John Kay writes about a lot of what he calls gender wang for Quillette, and but it does seem that Canada is a is an absolute outlier in that regard. Also, the Canadians are still COVID masking, so they are clearly completely bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, look, no offense to my Canadian subscribers and listeners, but like, you guys are cray. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, I mean, like, I don't care about poutine and Canadian bacon and John Candy and all the things you used to be famous for. Now you're just known as like a crazy country, you know? And also, it's like, it comes from all different directions. I mean, there's just a social media thing as we're recording, and this will be like a while that I'm going to post this, but whatever. You know, there's just something with like some funny like Hanuman statue, like this Hindu god, and now all the right-wing Canadians are freaking out. And I'm just like, bro, they always had these statues. They were always there. Yeah, the statue looks kind of silly, but like, I mean, get over it. It's not that big of a deal. You know, I don't know. It's just, it seems like Canadians are not, there's something, they need to be fixed. They need to be repaired as a country. Maybe it's a little too much Trudeau or, you know, Castro Jr. I don't know what you guys think, but, you know, maybe it's just been a little too long and they need some new leadership. I like the guy that eats apples, you know, like that guy, like, you know, the conservative guy. So yeah, he was eating the conservative candidate. He was eating an apple while a journalist was asking him stupid questions. Like, check it out on Twitter. But
Yeah.
We had a prime minister who ate a raw onion on live TV.
Yeah, that's a little weird. That's a little weird. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. No,
isn't it the small group thing? So, you know, Americans are also have an equal number of crazy people, but because there are so many of you, it gets diluted. It's like, you know, when you go on the tube, there are some crazy people, but your experience of the tube generally is very decorous because those crazy people are diluted 1,000 to 1 by boring normies like me. So I think that's the same thing is happening in Canada. It's a smaller country, and some people are just probably too cold to do any activism because you have to be really committed to go out in that weather. So that is also a filter. I mean, summer does exist there as well. But people who are doing, for example, pro-Palestine activism in Canada, that's got to be very hardcore. It's absolutely fucking brass monkeys at the moment in Canada. So I'm not doing any activism.
I want to talk about the Palestine thing really quickly, and then we'll talk about Quillette. But I gotta say, the Canada transgender stuff is always really weird. So Canada's always the one that has like the really weird things, like the 50-year-old transgender swimmer who was competing against teenage like literally the first time I read that, I'm just like, why is like the Babylon Bee, like, you know what I'm saying? Someone just picked up the Babylon Bee. That's not a real story, right? That can't have happened. but it did happen. So, I mean, again, like, why was this guy? I'm just gonna say it. Why didn't some dad beat him up? Like, what's wrong here? Like, you know what I'm saying? If my eighth grader was swimming with a 50-year-old man who's now a woman, who's actually a teenage girl, this guy's gonna get a whooping, right? So I mean, like, what is up with Canadians? Like, that's just.
What about
I
the
don't
fact
even.
that they're so nice? Maybe it's that, like, they're way too nice. They are way too agreeable. Like, all of them,
I don't
all
know.
of the Canadians
You
I've
don't-
met is super nice.
You don't hear this about. I mean, it doesn't happen in Quebec, right? This is always in like Toronto or whatever and stuff like that.
Mm.
You know, I mean, what if this guy was in Surrey and he was swimming with like a bunch of Indian, Canadian eighth graders? I think some brothers would have something to say about them. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. Yeah, this is like really a story where like I did the research because I just thought this had to be made up. You know, it's like that. It's like that guy. It's like that. I misgendered her, Stephanie, who was like some old dude that was like, "Hey, I'm actually like 11-year-old." So he's like living with a family and he's playing with the 11-year-old girl dolls because Stephanie is. Yeah, you can Google it. It was a real thing. Okay, like I mean, if Canadians didn't exist, I wouldn't believe this. You know, but
We would have to invent them.
maybe. I mean, South Park would have to invent them, you know?
Mm.
So, we've alluded to the whole Israel-Palestine thing a little bit. That's like obviously blown up and people have taken sides. And, the cancel wars now are reciprocal on this insofar as, some people who are Jewish or pro-Israel have gotten in trouble, but vice versa as well. It's pretty tough, actually. And I haven't been saying much partly because, like, I mean, what do you say? There's a war going on. People have like already like kind of established which side they're on and whatnot. How do you guys like deal with it? Because I know you try to be fair-minded, you have your own viewpoints, and also, you're both fundamentally liberal. Like a lot of what's going on here is tribalistic, where it's like, okay, like there's certain people they're gonna side with the Palestinians because, where the Jews are, they ain't,
Mhm.
and then there's a group of Jews where it's like, what Bibi says, is the the writ of God or whatever, right? So obviously those are extreme perspectives, but then there's a lot of other people trying to navigate. And if you're like a liberal person that you care about the truth, and this is not an issue where truth is easy to ascertain because your values matter, and it's pretty complicated in terms of these indigeneity discourses that we're having and all this stupid stuff. But I mean, how are you guys navigating? Like, I know Zoe, you've been mixing it up. Iona, I haven't seen you talk too much about it, so I'm just like, maybe that's perfect.
I have. She's been talking a lot about Israel.
I feel I've talked about it a lot. So I'm trying not to do too much opining on things where there's some ambiguity as to what the right approach would be. So, for example, I'm really trying not to backseat drive a war and suggest where I think bombing should be happening, not happening, or what the strategies should be. So I try to focus on things where I think the ethics are extremely clear. One, Israel needs to continue to exist. And two, we need to be against anti-Semitism. And three, Hamas is bad. And surprisingly, those three things are still controversial enough that I don't feel as though I have to get too deeply into the other things. I mean, there's some of the crazy things that were happening. For example, people were saying that the hostages were actually fell in love with their captors and stuff. I did comment on that a little bit, but I follow a lot of commentary on Israel, and I'm commenting on maybe 1 in 100 things that I see. Mostly because I feel it's there are various things where I'm not sure whether the actual actions that the Israelis are taking are the best actions, but I hope they are, because my support is definitely with Israel. I've become even skeptical of the two-state solution because I don't think that there can be a Palestinian state without serious regime change. among Palestinians. I still think that could happen. Many countries have turned around completely. Look at Nazi Germany. Look at what's happened in Cambodia, for example. So it could happen. You can. Things can be turned around, but it usually takes generations. So I've no idea what the longer term game plan is, but I want regime change in Gaza and the continued existence of Israel. I do also, full disclosure, live with an Israeli. So my housemate is an Israeli.
I think it's
Wait, do you eat a lot of hummus? Do you eat a lot of hummus?
We do eat a lot of hummus. Yeah, we do.
Yeah. That's cultural appropriation. Come on, Zoe.
I think it's great. Just in our Quillette Slack channel yesterday, we were remarking on how it's great that we're all on the same page when it comes to Israel. And that stance is simply that, pretty much as Iona was saying, that Israel has a right to exist, which is Zionism. Zionism has such a bad rap these days. It's used, well, not just these days, but it's used like a pejorative, but there's nothing wrong with being a Zionist. I'm a Zionist. We're all Zionists. So, and that Hamas is evil and a terrorist group and should be eliminated. So it's good that we're all on the same page with that. And I think at times where I've doubted my beliefs, it's been good to know that, all the intelligent people in our team, I think all of you, but especially like Claire and Jamie. Jamie is a very, very discerning guy. And I think Jamie very rarely gets it wrong. I haven't actually known him to get it wrong. So I feel assured that I'm on the same page as Jamie. Jamie is usually a good litmus test for these things. But yeah. I knew nothing about Israel. I knew nothing about Zionism or Judaism. It's been a sort of baptism of fire, excuse the pun, a Jewish baptism.
Jewish baptism.
And I think that gives me a very balanced view because I had no preconceptions about Jews or Israel. So when it all kicked off again on the 7th of October, I was just like, holy shit, why is this happening? And sort of looked at it and saw that the truth, I think I know where the truth lies. And the truth is that Israel has been attacked from day dot, and Jews have a right to live where they've always lived. And, people attack it for being an ethno-nationalist state, but I see no better reason to have a state when your ethnicity has been ethnically cleansed from the rest of the world. They need their own state, obviously. And why can't they have one little sliver of land? Like, Muslims have so many countries, and I don't know. It's been rough, but I'm definitely, showing. I wear this out, and I see whether I get a response. I haven't had any responses yet, but
what does that say?
It just says, how love will rebuild, which my boyfriend finds very cringe, and it has a Star of David. But I think it's a good message. I think, Israel has been attacked, and it will rebuild as it always has.
It's So
I'm wearing my Star of David earrings.
Okay. Yeah. For those of you who have video, for listeners, the Star of David earrings and a wristband. I'm wearing nothing that's you know what? I'm not going to go get
controversial.
My right now. Well, I mean, like I have 6 kippas, so So
Why?
Well, just because there was a bulk. I mean, I like a deal, okay? There's a bulk buy. So I got 6 kippas, and you never know when you forget your kippah, or like there's a kippah in another part of the route, whatever. I have a kippah.
So you go to Jewish ceremonies. I know you said you've got a lot of Jewish friends.
No, I haven't gone to anything specifically like religiously Jewish in Austin. I've gone to like some, Shabbos dinners, but the Jewish people I know mostly are not super religious.
Yeah. It's a fine line though, right? It's like I went to my first Jewish funeral yesterday, and my boyfriend's Jewish, and he was saying, it's not religious because I put on a dress. I wear pretty skimpy clothes in general, and it's part of my brand. And it's really hot here. And I said, babe, is this appropriate? And he said, well, maybe you want to cover your shoulders a bit more. And then I said, okay, I'm not really aware because I haven't been to a religious funeral as such. And he said, no, it's not religious, but they will be reading parts of, the Torah, and parts will be in Hebrew. And so it is religious. And I've heard Jews talk about that. I was talking to Pamela Paresky about it, when she has to fill in forms, are you religious? It's like with Jews, it's a hard question because it's an ethnicity and a religion, and lots of secular Jews, like your housemate, I'm sure Iona and Jono, like my boyfriend, they don't believe in God, but they, do the high holidays and things like that. So,
yeah, we did Hanukkah. Actually, I personally did not do it because I've just recovered from COVID. But he was the president of the Australian Skeptic Society. So I think he is definitely not religious. And actually, he regrets having had his sons circumcised. So
wow, we should get into that topic. We all have strong opinions, I think, on that.
But he is he's definitely not a believer. But yes, he is Jewish and he is Israeli.
Yeah, I just wanted to illustrate how much of a secularist he is. But so I believe his grandparents on both sides, one was from Germany and the other was from I think Latvia, and so I might be getting the or maybe Poland. I might be getting the region slightly wrong, but his grandparents on both sides were Zionists and came to Israel before the state of Israel happened, during the when it was British Mandate Palestine, and so they were among the first citizens of the state of Israel. But on both sides of the family, their parents, sisters and brothers, nieces, nephews, cousins, etc., stayed back in the old country, and they were all killed in the Holocaust. All of those who stayed were killed. But his branch of the family, his grandparental branch of the family on both sides went to Palestine.
Yeah, my boyfriend's uncle is Palestinian Jew.
Wait. Oh, he's a Palestinian Jew. Okay.
Yeah. And I think I reshared a tweet last night that showed the Palestinian football team in like, what year was it? I'm not sure what year. And they're all just Jewish names. So yeah, Jews lived in Palestine. What year was it? It was 1938. And yeah, they're all Jewish names.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's interesting that you guys have a unanimity there, because there's a lot of people, a lot of publications, a lot of movements, especially on the left, that are, and actually like all of you. I mean, I know you still, do you still say you're liberal or left or whatever?
Yeah, I don't think my politics actually changed at all, but I stopped describing myself as a leftist in kind of protest at what happened after October 7th. So I really have radicalized a little bit since 7th of October. When I think it was the 10th of October, when there was a pro-Palestine protest in Sydney and people were chanting "Gas the Jews" on the steps of the Opera House. And that's when I put the Israeli flag into my username. That was my response to that. And I've just stopped calling myself a leftist because I'm really disgusted at people on the left who are minimizing, condoning, even in a few cases celebrating, but usually just minimizing and relativizing and condoning Hamas violence. That is a red line for me. I do have some friends, close friends, my friend Nick, who is coming to dinner tomorrow, who are much more pro-Palestine. He and my Israeli housemate are good friends. He's a lovely guy. That's fine. That's fine. I don't even mind people who are kind of anti-Zionist and think Israel shouldn't actually exist. I can see an argument for that, even though I think it's misguided and wrong. It doesn't make sense at this point in time. But I can kind of understand it because I sort of feel like Pakistan shouldn't exist, actually.
I think the only argument is the argument that Freddie de Boer gave, which is that, if you're anti-nation state, the concept of a nation state, then yeah, of course you can be anti-Israel. But
yeah,
I don't think there's any good reason aside from that.
Sorry, I've got sidetracked here, but also I'm a Parsi, and we haven't lived in the ancestral homeland since before the Maoris came to New Zealand. So, and I don't feel as though we need to be back in Iran. I would like the Islamic Republic absolutely to be overthrown. I'd like to see a secular Iran, and I would find it personally very delightful if there was a resurgence of kind of cultural Zoroastrianism in Iran. But I don't, and I'd love to visit Iran so I could see the archaeological Zoroastrian sites. But I don't feel like there's some deep connection, and I and other Parsis ought to be there, and we have been somehow robbed of something important. I strongly believe human beings belong everywhere on the globe. So, if we could go back in time and I were magically in charge of this, I would have, I think the Jewish people needed a country, because of the long history of persecution. But I would have put it somewhere else. And I don't feel as though I'm not really interested in the idea of a blood and soil connection to a particular strip of land. So
where would you have put it?
I would have put it in coastal New South Wales. I think it would be absolutely fine to live next to.
Well, I live in Little Israel.
Yeah, I think it would have been kind of good for the Australian economy and things, actually. Or maybe in Argentina would also have worked. So
I think it's important that Israel's there because, it's such a holy, well, especially Jerusalem is such a holy site for so many people of, Abrahamic religions. And I want to, liberal democracy. I know people have their issues with Bibi's government, but it's still a better, I feel comfortable traveling to Israel, but I couldn't go to, even Lebanon or Palestine. I wouldn't be safe there.
Not the way you dress, no.
Hey, I can cover up when need be. And I'm happy to, respect their culture when I go there, but they should, I think Muslims, that's a whole other debate, but I think Muslims in Western countries should also respect liberal Western values as well, which are mostly Christian. Not that I'm a Christian.
Yeah, so this is where I disagree, I think. So I think the fact that there are so many holy sites there, that is just a load of made up bullshit. I don't mean what you're saying is bullshit. I mean, holy sites and holy stuff is ultimately bullshit. And I think that that's kind of part of the problem. And I also, actually, I don't feel that I respect the Muslim culture either. So one reason I haven't gone to Iran is I will not wear hijab. I'm not willing to respect their bullshit culture. which I don't see as Iranian culture. Actually, I think it's just the culture of Islam, which is like the Borg rolling into every country and making it one uniform mass. So I believe in universal values. So I believe in liberal values, but not because they're Western values, but because I think those are the best values, and we should have them at some point, hopefully everywhere.
Well, okay. I'm gonna ask you guys this. So we're talking about Quillette a little bit. There was a period. It's like, anyway, like I was helping out a little bit, like back during the pandemic, and there was a period when like Toby was on board, and there were some like disagreements, shall we say, about COVID. I think honestly, I couldn't follow all of the disagreements but what are the biggest disagreements on the team right now? Can you say? And we're not going to be talking about circumcision. We're not going to talk about circumcision.
Can I say something? So Iona and I both started working at Quillette post COVID and post Toby leaving. Toby and Quillette are on very good terms. He came to our Quillette social in London. We all got drunk together. It was great. And I think that's a good sign that, you can still get on. They had, Quillette had an editorial sort of stance on COVID, and Toby didn't agree, and he parted ways from what I understand, and it's all fine. But we tend to, we've taken an editorial stance with Israel, and we all agree on that. But maybe small things we wouldn't, I don't know, Iona, what do we not agree on?
I think there might be differences of emphasis.
Mm-hmm.
So I am, my intuitions are not conservative. I'm going to tear down those Chesterton's fences. I am, I guess I have a more leftist tradition in that I am an internationalist and a secularist. I think open borders would be a good stretch goal, but that is a utopian goal. And I'm not a believer in utopias. I don't think we should kind of do our politics with utopia in mind. I think I have a more left of center slant. I'm probably more in favor fiscally of higher levels of taxation. I'm more concerned about welfare state being in a good and healthy condition. I've become more, I think my most right-wing views are that I just absolutely fucking hate Islam. That's my like most radically reactionary view.
I've grown to become like that.
I don't mean to say that I dislike Muslims.
Wait, are you an Islamophobe? Iona, are you a proud Islamophobe?
Well, usually when people say that, they mean people who hate Muslims. I don't hate Muslims at all. And I'm really appalled by a lot of the anti-Muslim bigotry that I see happening in India. My boyfriend, I dated an Indian Muslim, as people who follow me on Twitter know. So I don't, in general, also, I don't really, my ire is not really directed at groups of people. I hate certain individuals, but my ire is not really directed at groups in that way. It's more ideas and ideologies that are like, that are sort of hanging in the air like viruses, and we're all susceptible to certain bad ideas. And Islam is one of the most successful of those bad memeplexes, I would say. And I feel a very, very strong dislike of it on all kinds of levels, intellectual, aesthetic, moral, and it does feel somewhat irrationally personal to me also because I'm a Parsi, but yeah, that doesn't make me feel uncomfortable when I meet people who are Muslim. Doesn't make me feel like being discriminatory. It's just that set of ideas I really dislike. In general, I'm pretty much a fedora wearing new atheist. I think religion is net bad. That's probably also an area of disagreement.
Yeah, we don't fully. I've changed my views on that over time. I used to be more.
Did you take your fedora? You took your fedora off?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, I still love Hitchens and Dawkins and
fedora
Sam
to
Harris.
Chador.
What is Chadora? That's like a female Chad.
Just like a hijab, you know.
Oh, right.
I'm just joking.
But Razib, so what are your thoughts? You've probably talked about it in previous episodes, but you're Bangladeshi.
Yeah, I don't have any deep thoughts about that. I mean, what deep thoughts about what?
Like, well, did you grow up in a Muslim household? Are you Muslim? Are you atheist?
Oh, my family is my parents are Muslim. That's the way I would explain it. But yeah, I'm atheist. I've always pretty much been atheist. But
and you don't have any strong opinions on supporting Palestine, hating Jews.
No, I'm a Jew lover. I mean, not literally.
Yeah.
That's not worked out. But
there's still time.
I have a story about that, but that's not for the podcast.
Is B Shapiro available? She's not single.
But not my. Anyway, you're totally. I would get really off track there. But I have a lot of. I think I've said this online. Like, it's a little difficult for me because working in tech. Israelis. That's just a thing. And obviously Jews who are not. Most of the Jews that I know are not Israeli, but actually many more are Israeli now because of my profession and as an entrepreneur and stuff. But in any case, I would say maybe 15%. Like, as an adult, probably 15 to 20% of my friends have been Jewish. But a lot of them, it's sometimes I would be like, oh yeah, you are Jewish because your last name, or you know what I'm saying? But they weren't super Jewy about it. So I didn't have super Jewish friends, but Jewish people were just kind of part of the background of my life. And so I've never had very strong opinions about how they're controlling the world and all that stuff. I was like, I mean, it's kind of good if they control the world, maybe, because they're chill. I don't know. I mean, it's it wasn't for me. It was never I never really had any hostility to Jews. I grew up with Jews to some extent. I mean, I grew up in Eastern Oregon. I didn't know too many Jews then, but when my dad was at grad school, his Ph.D. advisor was a Jew, and so I just knew Jewish people.
So you didn't grow up in your family with any anti-Jewish sentiment?
No, not really. I mean, my parents, they're anti-Israel because they're Muslim. They have Jewish friends, and they do believe Jews. Well, no, I shouldn't say some of the things because I don't want to get them in trouble. They're retired, okay. But still. Let's just say, in the Islamic world, there are certain stereotypes about Jews which they hold, but they have Jewish friends, right? So,
which I, as a non-Muslim, non-Jew, non-Arab, I never knew that Muslims felt like that or Arabs felt like that. I didn't know until I had, this really close friend who was French Algerian, and she just came out with very strong opinions about Jews in Israel, and we can no longer, the discussion about that boiling over into personal stuff. Well, it did, and we had to talk about it. And I said, feel free to mute my stories on Instagram. Or, I'm going to keep talking about it. I love you. We both said we loved each other, and we hugged and cried and left. But I don't know if unfortunately, I'm not sure if we'll be able to maintain friendship, but.
Yeah, I don't know. Iona might have some opinions on this because she's I've never been to India. But my personal experience and understanding from people who are Muslim who are not Arabs is what they do is they just kind of cut and paste some things they've heard from Arabs, and then they'll just kind of repeat it, but not with any deep knowledge. Does that make sense? It's kind of well, you're Muslim, so you should hate Israel, and Jews are stingy and greedy, and the usual things that you've kind of heard, but it's not my parents don't have a problem with Jews personally because it's just not a big geopolitical thing for them really. It's just they know that they should be, and so they'll repeat some of the things, So I've heard some of the things, and then and I've said this on Twitter, so I can say this. It's I've been at social events where some guys they're Muslims, they don't drink, but they get a little carried away, and they're Hitler should have finished the job. I've heard that many times when I was younger. They don't really mean it seriously, but they know that they should. they know that they should dislike Jews and Israel because of what they did to the Arabs there, if that makes sense. But again, it's added a remove. It's an added remove. So it's all really abstract. Never really had much of an effect on me because I live in America and I don't have like a Muslim consciousness or an Islamic consciousness. So it's not my business. That's my attitude, so I try to stay. Yeah.
My feeling is that people are extremely good at compartmentalizing, and are comfortable with extraordinary levels of cognitive dissonance, especially where religion is concerned. Religion is like, for many people, a separate category that's kind of orthogonal to real life. And I don't understand fully psychologically what's going on, but I've known quite a few Muslims who've been really lovely, absolutely lovely. And my ex-boyfriend's mother, who is very devout and was reading the Quran every night. And to me, I think the Quran is considerably worse than Mein Kampf. I'm quite radical about that, but also, I will defend her to the death. She was an absolutely beautiful human being and person. And I can see that he and his family are, because I see them on Facebook, taking a strongly pro-Palestine stance, but they're not taking the kind of pro-Palestine stance that I see some idiot Westerners taking. Like, they're not defending Hamas or pretending hostages fell in love or just being virulently anti-Semitic. It's just that they are focusing on civilian deaths in Gaza and things like that. So I feel that I don't like religion, and I especially don't like Islam, but I also feel that it's a little bit separate from how we judge specific individual human beings and what our relationships are with those human beings. I generally my strong feelings, my feelings of animosity are about the texts and about some people who are kind of, I guess, strongly, who are what I think of as Islamic hate preachers, or who are stirring people up, who are really...
There are so many people like that in the UK.
Islam. There's so many in the UK. Yeah, absolutely.
It's insane.
It's become a joke. It's become a meme on Twitter that whenever anybody says anything extreme from an Islamic point of view, the location is always London.
Londonistan.
Yeah. London.
Yeah. So I have relatives. I have a friend. He's Polish, but his name is Carol, and he lived in Dhaka for the World Bank for like, I think 3 years or something. He knows Bengali and stuff. Like, he's legit. But he told me that it's just, he was there when there was that like ISIS affiliated group that like was killing foreigners in some cafe or something. But it turned out that the ringleader was a guy who grew up in Britain and he came back to Bangladesh. And so it was just like, people in Bangladesh are like, apparently he was just like, they're all like, yeah, these like British Bangladeshis come back. It's a really like messed up situation with that, in terms of, I went to England in 2010, and I do have to say, I got a sense, and like I have relatives there, but like my cousins, he's atheist, he drinks and stuff like that. But he's told me some weird things, and I saw some things just on TV, in the pop culture, just in society. British people, they take multiculturalism a little too seriously. That's all I'm going to say. In terms of like, it's like they just allow these people to kind of like live a totally separate existence, and they're just like chill with that. In the US, it's not like that at all. I mean, yeah, the word multicultural, what really America, when you say multiculturalism, it means multiracialism, which I have a problem with that, but that's a separate thing. But in America, it's like, you can't have this sort of separation. People are working, and, you just you gotta have interactions with people. I definitely got a sense in the UK that you could live a separate life and then it was kind of expected. And actually, my cousin, he did complain to me that, like, for example, like when he was at university, he was dating for a while he dated this black chick. She's like Christian or whatever, and most of the students he was hanging out with were Pakistani, because there weren't that many. This is in the north of England. Most of the Bangladeshis, Bengalis live in the south, right? So he was at, I think, like, I forget which university, but whatever, it was in the north. And they were like, you shouldn't like date her. She's a kufar and she's a kala and all this stuff. And he was just like, you know, his parents are immigrants, but their parents were actually raised in the UK. So because the Pakistani community there is pretty well established. So the fact that they're saying this, and they're like, you know, they're probably, I mean, they're third generation, right? Their parents were second generation, and their grandparents were the ones that were born in Pakistan. And so there was UK's got a lot of issues. Like, I can crap on the UK forever because just like all the stuff that I've heard. Well, I mean, their tech salaries are like 50% lower. You know, all the issues with your NHS. It's just, you know, your multicultural issues are like crap. You know, I mean, it's bad. You know, I mean, like all these Indians are just like all like, oh, like they're like all imperialist. I'm like, dude, like, would you want to be them? I mean, like, it's pathetic, you know? I mean, they used to rule the world, and now they can like barely rule their own backyard. Like, let's keep it real, you know? Sorry, I'm just I think we should annex the UK.
I don't know whether I'd prefer to live in the States or the UK though. I don't know. I used to think the UK, but then I went to London recently. I know the whole of the UK isn't.
I mean, do you want to be broke? You want to be broke? Go live in the UK. You know what I'm saying? It's like, unless you work in finance.
I still don't fully comprehend how people live in America. Like, I just don't get it. Like,
all right, okay. I gotta tell you, like, I was telling a buddy of mine this, because like I had Philippe Lemoyne, you know, Frog. You guys know him because you know, he's written for you guys. But you know, he was talking about how immigrants in Europe kind of suck compared to immigrants to America, and like, I was thinking about it, and I was just like, yeah, it obviously makes sense, because if let's say you're like a machine learning guy at some like Indian Institute of Technology, where are you gonna go? You're going to go to San Francisco. Just like, no questions asked. You're not going to go to London. You're not going to go to Paris. Like, why would you want to go to Paris? Like, maybe you're an Indian that really likes pastries. Okay, those are not the best and the brightest. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's obviously true. And I remember one time my dad, when I was little, like, people would call him. They'd be like, oh, I'm trying to come to grad school in the United States. Like, you know, what do you want? What can you tell me about America? And he'd be like, yeah, like, you know, there's a lot of food here, and, you know, like all this like consumer stuff. But then I remember my dad would always be like, but remember, your family's not going to be here. And in America, if you don't work, you don't eat. You know, now that's literally not true. Like, you could go to some, you know, whatever, you could find food. But the point is, in America, there's not much of a welfare state. And also, like, if you come from some third world country and you have this big extended family that you're always depending on, they're not here. You know, so if you don't like have your shit together, you fucked, you know? So he was just like, you know, you better be willing to work your ass off, because that's what you expect in America. And so America does get those type of immigrants, you know?
Australia as well. Australia, where firstly, it's really hard to cross the border here illegally. Like, it's impossible. And we are far more picky with immigration. So Europe is not the same. Europe has sort of more, what's the word I'm looking for? Softer borders. And they haven't been as picky. I'm not sure if it's correct, but I think Germany let in, like, I don't know, 1 million Syrians or something. I'm not sure, but these are mostly
that's what I remember.
They're not like highly educated, you know, coders or doctors or anything. They're people who have seen shit in war, and
Well, so I'll let Iona talk, but just like one story that I have related to that is, like, I had a friend, and she's a PhD, and her husband's also a PhD, and he was his company. They're Indian, but his company put him in like Germany for like 5 years. And one thing that she always she like, did not like the experience of Germany. I've noticed. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to get like people disagreeing, but like my personal experience is most like educated brown people do not like Germans because they're racist, like in a very casual way compared to Americans. And like she always had an argument with the teachers because they were like, well, you guys are migrants, so your kids are going to be dumb. So it was just like always they would put them in the dumb classes, like they're trying to put them in vocational classes. And it was just always a struggle because they're like, well, you're immigrants, so you're not smart. But they're like, we have PhDs and we work for Bayer or whatever, you know? But they don't care. Like in Germany, people who are not German are just kind of like dumb second-class citizens, and they expect that they're just not going to succeed and excel. But it's partly like the kind of people they got. They got like peasants from Eastern Anatolia to work in the factories, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, if you read Greg Clark's work, social status is highly heritable. And so the people, you know, who were like lower middle class in Turkey, they're going to be lower middle class in Germany. Anyway, just my little rant about that. I actually like dug into a little bit more of the literature after talking to Philippe, and he was pretty right, actually.
That's interesting about class being heritable, because surely for women, like, we inherit it, but also we can move up quite.
Well, because of hypergamy. Yeah. So I did a podcast on this with Greg Clark, and like the most shocking statistics is that wealth in very patrilineal societies is obviously through your father, generally. So that's highly correlated. So, if your mother's wealthy and your father's poor, you tend to be poorer. But occupational status has equal correlation. So like they say England in the 18th century, 19th century. So that is indicating that occupational status is highly heritable because it's coming from both parents. So, whatever your intelligence. Another fact, which I knew, is the educational attainment paper about IQ and educational attainment. The correlation between spouses of the genes is higher than the characteristic itself. So your educational attainment correlation is lower than the genes that cause educational attainment. So people can like detect something about you, no matter whether you have a PhD or not, that you have the genes that result in educational attainment. So there's a lot of weird things related to social class that, so in America, for example, we have these like two of the Republican candidates now of the final like four or whatever are brown. They're obviously brown. And like, I'm in some right-wing group chats and people are freaking out because they're like, what the fuck? These people are taking over. And I was like, yeah,
class,
kind of is.
Right?
Yeah, well, actually, Nikki's a Jat, and like I don't want to get into it. That's the whole argument. But I don't want to get into that. But the whole point is like they're visible. 20 years ago, my friend, he said that we're not like the Jews. Like when we start to like come into power, people are going to recognize us because we look so different, and they're going to get really pissed. He was exactly right. Like I've heard like many people complain about all the tech people that are brown, is because like you could tell we're there. Like. You could look at the guy who's like running Microsoft, look at the guy who's running Google or was running Twitter. You know what I'm saying? They look different. Whereas if you're Jewish, a lot of people don't know who's Jewish or not. Even by name. Like most people don't have names like Goldstein or something. It could be like Larry Ellison. Is he Jewish or not? He was actually adopted and, and all this stuff. And
interestingly, though, there aren't that many Jews in politics. Like I think Chuck Schumer he held some titles like the first Jew to be elected.
Well, they don't get into like executive positions, but they tend to be in legislative positions. So they're like, like 15% of the House.
Yeah.
But they never, once you get to the executive, it has to be a much more generic person, right? So Biden is a second Catholic, right? But Catholics have been 35% of America's population, 30% of America's population forever. But he's the second Catholic. So it's just a really, really generic sieve with our like presidential. So where's
what about Obama and stuff? Like, I think I don't know. I was asking my boyfriend about it, and I think his grandma. Maybe there's like a saying in Jewish culture, but it's like Jews don't go into politics. I don't know.
Well, in democratic politics, although Disraeli was Jewish, although he converted, right? So, but in Britain, you had yeah. What?
There's Bernie, my favorite politician.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Although he himself is also not very. I mean, he's Jewish in like that secular socialist way, right? But if you're like, let's say you're like, yeah, well, sort of. But doesn't he want a ceasefire? I don't know.
I'm not
He's
sure.
been like he's been waffled on it.
Humanitarian pause.
Yeah. But
so that
I
Hamas can regroup. Anyway.
But anyway, I mean, like, I guess one thing that we've been alluding to, is like, Quillette's and internet. It's like, across the English speaking world. But I always find it interesting, like different perspectives, even though we speak the same language, and whatnot. Obviously, like originally, like Britain colonized all these countries, and yet there's like all these different. Even the Canadians. I mean, they're crazy. Like they sound like Americans, except they're a little weird, but they're also like very crazy. They're arguably more crazy than Australians and British people. Like, what's up with that? And like, I don't know if you want to count Ireland. I know like they're ambivalent, but they do speak English. So, so I mean, it's just like these countries, we have like all these like differences. I mean, Iona, you move between the different countries. Like, I mean, what is your like general sense of like how they relate? And obviously you're not coming to America that much. I guess shows how
Well,
much you love us. But
I used to be in America for about a decade. I was in America for 3 months of every year. And I had a little round that I did. I usually went to the Bay Area, Portland, Tucson, and New York City. And then there are a few other stops, Austin, and a couple of times Miami. And I've lived in the States twice. I lived in St. Paul, Minnesota for 3 years.
I remember that.
I also lived in Los Angeles for a year. I mean, I feel that in the States, it's so the standard of living is salaries are higher. The standard of living is higher, but I don't enjoy living in most places in the States as much as I would enjoy living in London. London is, to me, more beautiful, has more history, and the history is more obvious and clear and visible. It's partly because I studied 18th century English literature, and so a lot of places in London for me are steeped in wonderful associations and still have the architecture and the traditions to show that. So I find a lot of not Australia, I love Australia. I find a lot of America very sterile. And also I feel that while New York is fun to visit in summer, I find it very much less user-friendly than London. It's much more difficult to get around. I don't like the subway as much as the tube. And the weather in winter in large parts of the States just makes it completely uninhabitable as far as I'm concerned.
Wait, is it because it's too cold or too hot?
Too cold. Yeah, it's too cold.
I mean, I live in the southernmost capital in the continental U.S. So it is. I think it's been like 18, 19 Celsius the last couple of days. So
I enjoyed living in LA, but the problem with LA was transport. LA is so sprawling, and I did take public transport even when I lived back then in LA, and certain routes are really easy to do in LA. So we were living in Westwood, and at one point I was living in Westwood and working in Pasadena. That was perfect. I went on the tram, and this was back in the 1990s, early 90s. I'm sure it's even better now. That was fantastic. But for most places, and for most people we wanted to meet, and even if we wanted to just go out for dinner and meet friends, my then boyfriend and I, we would have to either meet them for dinner at like 4:30 or 11 p.m., or else we had to reckon in spending about 3 hours on the freeway. I mean, I just spent an extraordinary proportion of my day in the car, in traffic, in Los Angeles. And that really soured things for me.
sure.
I loved Miami. I feel Miami is wonderful. Miami is all the advantages of being in.
I'm talking about America. I'm talking about the U.S.
Yeah.
Miami's Latinx America.
Yeah. And that's my favorite place. Austin is quite nice. So there are some livable places in the US, I think, but much of the US I just don't think is very much fun to live in. The Bay Area, this level of standard of living is so low because the cost of living there is so high. Unless you are earning some really serious fuck off money, then you're going to be living in a tiny place with roommates in Oakland with homeless people camped outside your door and still paying like twice as much as you would be paying anywhere else. Yeah, I feel like there are a few little bits of the States that are livable, but most of it I find quite sterile, and with awful weather, and just I would rather be in the UK.
Okay, we got enough anti-Americanism from you, ma'am, miss. Okay, so Zoe, I know you came to the States relatively, I met you at the Quillette Social. You've come to America a couple of times now, right?
Twice.
Say something.
Twice in 1
Say
year.
Say something good. I know you have some good things to say.
Americans are mostly very kind, polite people.
That's not me, but
It's an interesting country. Every state is so different. You know, unlike Australia, where we're pretty homogenous. Yeah, I mean, I was just in DC for the first time. DC is amazing. I could live there for sure. Georgetown is beautiful. It's the capital of the free world, and I love that. And I think it's in good hands mostly.
Yeah, I believe in the Pax Americana. I'm a believer in the U.S.
Yeah, you guys want to like free ride on our like military prowess.
Yeah,
like talk crap about our quality of life. I got it. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. There's a lot to take in. I'm gonna be like entirely honest and you know, like many years ago, and like I'm not like I'm kind of like my listeners know how I am. So many like it was like a decade ago. We had this nanny, and she was American born, English speaking, by the way. And you know, she was kind of she was a little bit woke. I mean, she is woke. I mean, I'm still Facebook friends with her, and you know, she's liberal, and she knew I was Republican. I'm right wing, you know, so she never like met one of us for, you know, I think since she was like a kid or something, and she was like, you know, how do you deal with like how do you think we should deal with poverty? And I just looked at her, I was like, don't be poor, you know. Now, like I was being glib there. That is kind of the American solution, right? But you know, I live a good life. I have a lot of freedom. I do work a lot, but I have, I mean, I think people can tell I have like, I'm not on the margin that way. Okay. And I, you know, I do think, yes, you know, that would be difficult. On the other hand, you know, poor people in America are also obese. So it's not like they're starving. You know, I don't want to overdo it. So, I guess there are some trade-offs. We do have like high level of, inequality, and, you know, there's a little bit of the winner take all, system. I will say, you know, I don't really like understand how people who make less than 100,000 survive, but that's
in the States.
You know, yeah, I don't get it. You know, because like,
I don't
like,
understand it either, really.
Yeah, I think the median household income is lower.
Australia. I prefer the style of capitalism that we have in Australia. Personally, I think most people can live a pretty good life. Like my aunt and uncle, he's a mechanic and she was a nurse, but not like a highly trained nurse. And they lived in an area that was a pretty like poor bogan area of Newcastle where I'm from. But, you know, it slowly became gentrified and they built.
What does bogan mean? What does bogan mean?
Bogan is like sort of redneck, lacking culture.
Okay.
I'm from, like the biggest coal mining town in Australia, one of them. The biggest coal port in the world. So, yeah, you know, but they could afford to, you know, buy property, and they renovated and they had a pool, and now they bought a camper van, and most people can live really good lives, even if you work in hospo or hospitality, you know. I like that about my country.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've heard that. I have, my kids have cousins in Australia, in Perth.
Nice.
So I want to go someday. You know,
I've never been to Perth. It's like a 5-hour flight. So.
Yeah, it's like it's the most isolated large city in the world by air. You know.
Yeah.
You know, and if you want to hang out with Afrikaners, go there. But
yeah, that's well, around here as well, in this part of Sydney as well, lots of South Africans.
I think I have second cousins in Australia, but it's part of family that I don't really like know very well. But you know, yeah, I wouldn't probably visit them. I'd probably visit my kids' cousins first. But I want to go someday. Like I want to go to Sydney.
Yeah, you've got to come.
Check it. Yeah, I got to check it out. And you know, I want to go back to England. Actually, this year I want to go back to England. Maybe I should like do some like podcasts in England or something like that. I can work remote. It's just, you know, I fly to SF a lot in New York for work. New York I can keep flying to from London. That's easy, right? It's just that Austin is actually like, you know, not to over promote it. It's actually convenient if you have to fly to the West Coast and East Coast a lot. It's right in the middle of the country. So it's
We
like
might be
not-
going there next year, maybe.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
that's
what it
it'll
says.
be a big party if you guys, but if you guys show up, it'll be a big party. Like there's a lot of there's a big scene here, and it's fun. So I guess like I should wind down. Like we've been talking for a while. Where is Quillette going in the future? Like, what are you guys going to be? What trouble are you up to? Okay, like I'm checking because I do read Quillette. Like I am a subscriber, as you guys know. And there's like a lot of like interesting, deep stuff in there. There's some, there's still some trans stuff here and there. You got Alex Byrne,
Yes.
troublemaker in there. But then you have like other stuff. I actually, as we're recording, you have something about the EAC versus the D cells and whatnot. And that's actually like a big thing in my circles right now. There's kind of a generational gap, actually. A lot of the D cells are older. And older, I mean like old geriatric millennials, not like super old or anything like that. So there's a lot of stuff going on. I don't know how interested other people are to that, but what do you guys as like an editor and community manager, a Girl Friday, like what are you guys seeing for the future of Quillette? Because it used to be a joke. You guys like were like obsessed with race science, but like you guys don't do much of that anymore. I think that's been kind of done.
We definitely
You've established the racial hierarchies, and so now you've moved on to the other issues, right?
Yeah, it doesn't mean we've stopped copying flack for it, especially online. But those people are so stuck in like 2019, 2020. Or 2018 actually was when we were publishing most of that stuff. But yeah, we definitely publish a lot less culture war stuff, but we still publish a bit. And we're publishing more than ever. I think so I keep track of like all our metrics, and I think we've like last year we published 400 and something articles, and this year we've published, wait, I'll find it. We've published a lot. And yeah, we keep growing.
Some of it's pretty long.
Doubled our revenue in a year.
I wrote for you guys too this year again. It's been a while.
Good.
Oh
yeah.
Just like
You did a book review.
Yeah, it's been a while. I just I don't have like that much bandwidth, so I mostly focus on my Substack, and then I do my startup thing. But if someday I'm gonna get so rich that I can like then just write. That's my dream. Just then I can be like a permanent loudmouth instead of just like the evenings. Which is what I'm currently doing. But yeah.
I think the
good.
biggest issue now is just that there are more people in this space, but we're one of the OGs, and we're doing well, and it's fun, and I think we all really love our jobs.
Are you guys not on talking terms with Unheard? I'm joking.
No,
I'm joking.
Hey, like free publicity, created drama could that's a really big deal. Yeah. No, it's totally true. Beefs drive engagement, like if there was like a beef between Freddie Sayers and Claire Lehmann, like who's hotter? I think opinions are going to be different. Who's more Aryan?
I haven't seen Freddie in bikini, so can't judge.
You haven't what?
I haven't seen Freddie in bikini.
Yeah, do not mention that to him. He's very sensitive about his looks. Trust me.
Really?
I actually don't know what he looks like.
I made a joke. Okay.
It looks like an Ubermensch.
Yeah, like I made a joke. I made a joke that he has a very good face for video podcasting. And like, I've written for Unheard, and I got apparently like he was pissed that I said that.
What?
Because he wants to be taken seriously. He wants to be taken seriously. But anyway, like I don't think he's listening to this, so I can just say it. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I was just having fun. You know what I'm saying? I don't take myself too seriously.
I really like that about you, Razib, and I really like that about like how you tweet and how you operate online. You inspire me, because sometimes I feel bad. I'm like, oh, I don't take these things seriously enough. I obviously am a very serious person, but I also love to have fun online,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the issue is, I did say this the other day. I was like, if you're like an extroverted, disagreeable person, work for yourself. It's always been a problem. Like, cause I've had like legit jobs. Like I wrote algorithms for like companies that are used by millions of people. Like I do serious things, but I also like to fuck around. And unfortunately, like I expose it, and like people are like, you're like 46 years old. Like, why are you behaving like this? And I'm like, I do what I want. Okay. It's a free country. And what are you
gotta
going to do?
have
Fire
fun.
me? You know? So yeah, it's like, do you know that, is that scene in, was it like, not Dazed and Confused? It was like, Matthew McConaughey says, like, what I
Matthew.
love about
Yeah.
what I love about high school girls is I keep getting older. They stay the same age. It's like I hang out with these like 25-year-old tech bros. That's what I was doing when I was 35. You know what I'm saying? That's what I was doing when I was 25. I'm still hanging out with the 25-year-old tech bros. That's just the way I am. You know what I'm saying? So if I can do it, I'll keep doing it. Why not? No one's gonna be stopping me. And I think that's why I will say, like, just kind of being serious. The reason that I get along with you guys so much is, we all believe in truth, whatever, little disagreements we might have, about like politics or culture, this America hating Iona here. No, but, we believe in truth and we're honest and we're earnest about that aspect. And so I think if that's there, like, why can't you have fun and why can't you joke around? I don't think you need to present a facade of seriousness about everything when it's quite clear that you're serious about what matters. Okay. So I'm serious. Like, I do not I don't LARP online. That's why I don't do an Anon account. Like, I am who I am. And people who meet me in real life, they're like, oh, you're basically just the person who are on Twitter, like, you don't really like censor too much and stuff like that. And that's just how I am. And it works with my personality. I'm not saying everyone needs to do that. But that is also like part of my philosophy. I don't necessarily bring my whole self. Like, I don't talk about, we're friends. You guys know about my personal life. People out there, you guys don't know about my personal life. And that's the way it's going to stay in general, because I don't care that people know that, right? So it's not like I put everything out there, but Iona's a little different, I love you, so it's fine. Like, I accept that difference. You know what I'm saying? But I think people need to find their own way of being in the world. And, I'm not like a big, like, oh, diversity, blah, blah, blah. But, people are diverse, like Zoe, you figured out like a way to like make a living, stir in trouble on the internet, whereas like someone else is like working in an office, and like being angry on social media. It's just like different, like Iona's like, she was an academic and now she's doing this and living in all these different countries. And so I guess what I would tell people out there is, figure out your own way to be happy. And there's no like one way, and people shouldn't judge you for what works for you. Like, if you what I would tell people is probably optimally, if you're talking about social media, if you're talking about like all this stuff, like, either be totally legible or totally illegible. You're not going to be able to have it in the middle. Just like, don't have a public political profile if you're scared. Just do your job and vote and do that. And if you're going to offer your opinion, just go all in. Don't fake it. Just go all in, because like, you're gonna get flack no matter what, right? Like, the people are like, this is a harsh world out there. They're not gonna like give you charity. That's like, if you want charity, go to the Salvation Army. I don't know. You're not gonna get it. You're not gonna get it online. Like, we all know about that, right? Like, so like, let's just like go. Anyway, that's my little final words. But what about you, Iona?
I think you won't get charity in the sense of everybody putting a charitable interpretation on what you say, but you will get actual literal charity. I feel that the disadvantages of revealing everything online, as a friend of mine said, I reveal things publicly online and also in my Substack that he wouldn't tell his closest friend. And the disadvantages of that is I do have a really small number of haters who are kind of obsessive. And when I say something personal, they're writing about it in order to try to hurt my feelings.
Sure.
But surprisingly, that proportion of them is so tiny. And I have stopped really commenting or responding because it seems unfair to focus on them when so many people are supportive. Seems unfair to the supportive people. So I feel as though the number of enemies is like this tiny. And I'm very outspoken. I have unpopular opinions. And I also post, everything about my emotional life, my past. I have nude photos, the works. And the number of people who are not nice are just like a teensy tiny number. I'm not counting kind of hit and run sort of people who are just see an Israel flag and are writing something nasty.
Sure.
I would be doing that to anybody. I don't really count them. That's just like the little mosquitoes of Twitter, or the kitty litter of Twitter. But everybody else is a lovely pussycat coming over to be petted, all furry and purring and nice. And, the amount of support has been extraordinary. So I have met many, many people in real life from Twitter. I have got work and jobs from Twitter. I've been able to meet and talk to people who famous people I wouldn't otherwise have had any access to. And also I have stayed at, I've been invited to dinner by so many people. I've been taken on holiday. I've stayed at people's homes. So the amount of kind of goodwill and generosity is just absolutely enormous. And the number of people who are not nice is a tiny drop in the bucket. I guess I would feel differently if I had a seriously dangerous stalker, but I feel that could happen anyway without being all that personal. It's not like I'm sharing my address out there. So I feel that the people are naturally very loss averse and have a negativity bias, and that is natural, healthy, and we are all evolved from people who didn't just chill out watching the flowers, but noticed there was a tiger over there and got the hell out of there.
Sure.
You need to focus on the negative because that's the stuff that may create a problem in which you may have to do something about. Whereas if everything is fine, you don't have to take action. So I understand that, but also the benefits of being extremely open out there are huge. And I think quite underrated.
Zoe, I'll let you close out. You are the social media and community manager. What are your thoughts about this world? Like you're making your career in it in a way. Like, is it as bad as everyone says, or is it as positive as? Iona's experienced both, but obviously net positive, right?
Yeah, I love life. I'm quite hedonistic in many ways. I think life is there to be enjoyed. I feel extremely grateful that I have this life and my job, and that I've got to meet people like you and get to travel. Incredible. I feel very, very lucky. And I hope, I am a bit concerned about like the future of the West, I suppose. That's really on my mind lately. I want my country to keep being the great country that it is. And I think we need to preserve that, and that takes some serious thought and discussions. But
it takes more than thought. You're of
we
a
need
certain
to
age,
preserve it.
so you're of a certain age. Like you know what you need to do.
I know where this is going. I'm practicing. I'm getting there. It's fun. But yeah, life is short. Enjoy it. It's serious. We all care about serious stuff, but we also have a lot of fun, and that's great.
For sure. It was great talking to you. I hope the listeners appreciate. We're all friends here, and just having a good time.
Yeah.
And
listen to my podcast.
Yes,
Quillette, etc.
Podcast. Yeah, and like it's on YouTube too.
It is.
So it's like a much better optics than my YouTube. That's all I'm going to say. All right.
Whole genome sequencing is used for adults and children every day to assess risk for thousands of diseases. Orchid, a genetics company led by scientists from Stanford, is able to do this for IVF embryos. Now, instead of waiting for a diagnosis, parents can assess if their embryos have genetic variants known to cause severe conditions before their child's even born. No other tests can detect these issues so thoroughly or so early. So check them out at orchidhealth.com.
this podcast for kids? This is my favorite